Hello, hello. Good evening, everybody. I hope you are well. Um, yeah, I'm gonna do something a bit different for tonight's stream. Normally, we just play games on the stream here, but I keep seeing people saying that retro gaming is too expensive. It's impossible to get into, and I'm not gonna lie. Retro gaming is an expensive hobby, certainly relative to what it used to be. Um, and so what I've learned over the past 20 years of like actively collecting and like nearly 10 years on Retro Gamer as a magazine um has helped me to buy games when they are not expensive. Thank you, Deacon. So I have a collection of over 1,000 games. I have dozens of consoles. And I have the kind of games that go for stupid money now, like Pokemon games, like Leaf Green over 100 quid, Soul Silver over 100 quid, um, like King of Fighters 98 Ultimate Match on the PS2 over 100 quid. So if I wanted the collection I had today and I was starting now, I wouldn't have been able to get it. And I wanted to share the tips that have helped me to get the collection that I've got. So without further adoing, and I'm sorry, it's a bloody PowerPoint presentation, but I couldn't think of a better way to do this. Oh yeah, that Fraser one, that's big money. That will cost you more than a tossed salad and scrambled eggs. Uh, so yes, I have done a bloody PowerPoint presentation. But this is my guide to upsetting your bank manager slash wife slash whoever less. So why are retro games so expensive? So the first thing is that the interest has kind of increased over the years. Hey, Overlord, welcome on in. So, like, if you go back 20 years, when I was still in secondary school, God help me, we didn't have dedicated retro gaming media. Like, we didn't even have YouTube. Retro Gamer hadn't yet launched, let alone websites like Time Extension. Retro gaming was relatively relatively niche in terms of its interest. It's certainly blown up since then. Another factor, decreased supply. Like, apart from the fact that games and consoles get involved in accidents or just fail, there's the fact that once a collector gets hold of a game, it ceases to circulate. That's like, it's very rare that it will leave their hands again. And that sort of coincides with the increased interest. You've got old players returning to their nostalgic favorites, the younger players who just want to see the origins of franchises that they grew up with themselves. Going back to the NES to see what Mario was all about then. And because of the increased interest and because of the spread of online information, sellers just are better informed these days than they used to be. Anyone who wants to know how much their game is worth can check how much their game is worth. Just go for a valuation on a Facebook group, check eBay sold listings. Most people don't check eBay sold listings. They just look at the ambitious buy it nows and decide that's what's the going rate is. But, people gonna people. And then there is the arrival of the investor class. People who are not into retro games for gaming, but because they want to make some money. You've got the graded games scammers and such, but there are people who like sealed game collectors. If they value anything about the games, they are only valuing them on an ornamental basis. But more likely they are just getting together a big collection so they can sell it in bulk down the line and make a ton of money. So, this is where we have to look at what we can do to avoid these issues. How can we get in before the interest increases? How can we get in before the supplies run dry? And hey, Ryokazuki, how's it going? And, you know, how do we get in before the scumbag profiteers? And that leads me on to my first major point, which is you've got to use the power of time. If you think collecting games is expensive, and you want to know where to get cheap games, you need to reframe your thinking. The question shouldn't be, where can I buy cheap games, but when can I buy cheap games? And what you need to do is basically buy old games, not retro games. If there is anything that you take away from tonight, that's the most important lesson. Because every retro game was once a new game. Just about every expensive game was once much, much cheaper than it currently is. I've got some examples, and I've deliberately chosen games that I've never written about, so you can't accuse me of manipulating the market. Rio, that's an excellent point. If you can't find it cheap now, you probably won't find it cheap later, and we will come on to that. So I bought Aliens Infestation for $5. I thought it was an interesting sounding game. WayForward is a fairly dependable team. You know, it's an interesting thing to me, and I bought that for $5. CEX now sells that for 52 quid, which is over 10 times what I paid. Another example, Hard Edge for the PlayStation. I paid $8.99. That now goes for 50 quid at CEX. And I'm using CEX prices because with eBay you get variation. With CEX, it's, you know, consistent between stores. So it's not like CEX is just a terrible place to buy games, though. I bought Ribbit King from them for $5. It's now 40 quid. I bought Gungrave Overdose on the PS2 from them for £1.50. It's now £28. You have an enemy when it comes to collecting games, and it's this guy. The best time to buy a game is before I start writing about it, and before the YouTubers get hold of it. Like, you see anything that the Grumps get hold of, Angry Video Game Nerd, they increase the interest. So just about every system goes through a cycle. It starts off new and expensive, gets old and relatively unloved, and then nostalgic interest starts to kick in. And during that middle phase is when a console's games will reach their price floor. And that's the time to swoop in and pick up anything that interests you. If you want systems that are at their around their price floors right now, the Wii, the Xbox 360, the PS3, they're all around their price floors. There are a lot of popular games on those systems that are selling for under $5. Some are even as little as £1, and you can amass an impressive collection of games for very, very little outlay. Rio, what's your story along the along those lines? Bare Knuckle 3 goes from seeing money now. It's common knowledge it's a proper version of Streets of Rage 3. Exactly. Increased information. Gonna crack a joke about Hard Edge getting expensive because of the Ret Spray coverage, but yeah, absolutely it contributes. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if something like the Grumps playthrough of Devil's Third contributed to the price of that game. This is how we find Slipknot CDs. Buying old music is considerably easier than buying old games, I find. So the next tip along these lines, you need to watch every platform until it's dead, like properly buried in the ground. saw a copy of Mary Kate and Ashley's Sweet 16 License to Drive. Nearly bought it purely on the Grumps playthrough, but couldn't bring myself to do it. Shibuya Terminal, welcome on back, and thank you for the resub. So, went to Play Expo Blackpool last year. So does all the replay events, selling loose Mega Drive pads. Saw a 6-button 15 quid held off on it. Glasgow Gaming Market was a month later. How much for the exact same pad? 30 quid. Exactly. If you can't find it cheap now, you probably won't do later, unless it's something new. Wigsart, hello. Thank you for coming on in. Thanks for checking out the stream for the first time. Hope you're well. So, if you want a proof of the power of a late game release, we can look at some PS2 football games here. They're like, annual sports games are kind of the closest thing you can get to disposable video games. You can see here CEX basically begging you to take them anywhere else. They will give you a penny for them, and they sell them for 50p. You can't get a newspaper or a pint of milk for 50p today. And yet, the last Pro Evolution Soccer on PS2, 2014, sells for over 50 quid. That's the power of a late release. And, like, if you're thinking, well, Pro Evo isn't as popular as FIFA 14, same year, that sells for 28 quid. An old FIFA selling for that much. No one buys old FIFAs for nearly 30 quid. So, if that's what happens to PS2 sports games, you can imagine what might happen to something a little more interesting. So, like, most people abandoned the good ship Dreamcast when the new releases kind of dried up in Europe and the US in 2002. I rode the flaming wreckage until it crashed ashore, and I bought, like, most of the Japanese releases until they stopped in 2007. And they weren't cheap then, but they were a lot cheaper than they are now. So on eBay, Under Defeat will go for 65 to 150 quid. Siberia 2, 85 to 150. Puyo Puyo Fever, 105 to 130. Karos, 100 to 150. Redurgi, 125 to 150. Trizeal goes up to 160. And Border Down is 200 quid, and that's for the standard edition. And those are import games. But then you look at something like the King of Fighters 98 Ultimate Match, which actually released over here in 2009. And that's a few years before the sports games that we looked at, but still, a time when most players had moved on from the PS2. I bought this for €15, brand new in 2010, and CEX now sells it for 140 quid. Hey Aidan, welcome on in. Now, that game had over a decade to accumulate that much value, but the process can actually happen far quicker than that. And that kind of leads me on to my next point. Failed systems get expensive fast. So, by late 2017, the Vita was over 5 years old, and if it wasn't already obvious, the party was over. The Switch was really becoming rapidly successful. It just made it undeniable. But it was still a good destination for weeb games, particularly visual novels. And I bought Danganronpa V3 that year, had a heck of a good time with it. That was only 5.5 years ago. And I looked, holy moly, it's selling for 90 quid already. And that's just the regular edition, not the collector's edition that I bought. Zero Escape, the game that I've got here, the Nonary games, came out the same year. That's already 70 quid. I didn't pick that one up at launch, but I picked it up a year and a half ago. It was only 37 quid brand new. On the Wii U, I was able to pick up Devil's Third for a shade under £13 brand new 4 years ago. That one's now selling for 70 quid too. Xenoblade Chronicles X bought for £12 from CEX. They now sell it for 25. Bought the Star Fox Zero First Print Edition with Star Fox Guard for 28 quid. They now sell it for 60. So time is a factor. The sad truth is that the price floor for these systems, for the Vita, for the Wii U, has already been and gone. And, you know, like, the same goes for plenty of older systems. Like, I remember a time when you could get Mega CD games for under a fiver. Those same games are now in the 70 to 100 quid range. The US Saturn market is truly, truly bonkers. It's too late to do anything about those now, but it's a good thing to bear in mind for any platforms that struggle in the future. Gundam Jetty Kite. So the reason I use CEX is because basically they're consistent across stores. With eBay, you get some variation. Obviously, they're in line. They're in line with broad market values. You will find cheaper games, and I will get on to why you should try to avoid buying from CEX if you can. But generally speaking, they're not dissimilar to what you'll find on eBay or other places. So while you won't get the best prices from them, I think is a fair reference. So one of the things that you'll notice about the kinds of games that have come up so far is that a lot of the games I've highlighted with particularly high prices have cult qualities. They might come from a particular developer. They might be in a relatively niche genre like visual novels. That's no accident. Like, the kinds of games that don't sell loads of copies but do have passionate fan bases, those are the games that are going to become expensive. And particularly anything that's like quite a unique experience. So I mentioned Ribbit King earlier. Bought it for a fiver from CEX. They now sell it for 40. And again, this is not buying from CEX a long time ago. This is buying from CEX just before the pandemic. Another really great example of this is Mr. Mosquito. When nobody really knew about it, I picked that up for £3.50 complete, again, from CEX. And these days, it's a staple of lists of weird games, and it makes for great YouTube and Twitch content. And that's why CEX now sells that one for 60 quid. Sometimes it's not so much about the innate qualities of the games, but maybe they have a developer that has a particular following. Suda51 games are a really good example of this. So I paid £2.50 for Flower, Sun and Rain, and it's now 22 quid at CEX. It's over 8 times the price I paid for it. Lollipop Chainsaw, they'll sell for 40 quid on PS3, 25 on 360. Shadows of the Dam, 28 on PS3, 18 on 360. And both of those systems are more or less at their price floors right now. The PS4 versions of the Silver Case and 25th Ward, they're already going for £30 each from CEX. And I bought those for $16.50 and $7.50 respectively 3 years ago, both including shipping, brand new. Then, of course, you've got Michigan Report from Hell. So I missed out on a copy that sold for 43 quid in 2016. Later bought a brand new Italian copy for 60 quid in 2018. And that game now, for the disc alone on eBay, will go for 130 quid. The last sealed copy like mine went for 390 on eBay. And if you've got the UK packaging variant with the BBFC logo rather than the PEGI logo, that sells for 480 quid at CEX, and probably more if you've got it sealed. Yeah, the 360 versions are cheaper than the PS3, and that's something interesting that we'll come to later about the platform effect. Broadly speaking, Xbox games do run cheaper, and we'll have a look at that. Certain genres tend to be particularly susceptible to big prices. So if you look at the most expensive PS2 games at CEX, you'll just see lots of survival horror. On the 3DS, Japanese RPGs are dominating the top of the list. I only found out that Project Cross Zone 2, which is a game that I have, is going for over 100 quid while doing the research for this. 2D shoot 'em ups are often pricey, particularly the highly prized ones on the Saturn, PC Engine, Dreamcast. How much does PS2 compatible PS3 go for these days? I don't know off the top of my head, but it will be more than 60 quid, I guarantee you that. Yeah, Rule of Rose. Rule of Rose is not a game that's worth £520, but it gets built up like that. And there are games that are not on this list here, like Haunting Grounds, I think it's called. Like, that's money. So those are the kinds of things that you need to look out for. And one last thing, and this ties into what Ryo Gazuki was saying. You can't find it now, you probably won't find it later. So if you're looking for a relatively recent game and you're struggling to find it, that's a good sign that it could become harder to acquire later on. With Exit 2, I struggled to confirm that even had a physical PSP release over here. When I found a copy for $16.99, pounced on it. Glad I did. It's really not an easy game to get hold of now. CEX has no copies. Even a loose UMD recently went for 30 quid on eBay. Complete one went for a little bit more. And the PSP is a dirt cheap platform right now, so those prices are pretty remarkable. And based on this principle, one of the next games I'm planning to pick up is Blue Reflection 1. So the fact that it's already not cheap gives me the impression that it may be even harder to acquire down the line. And having enjoyed my time with the sequel, I know that I definitely want to play the original, and I value that enough to try to get this before it becomes stupid money. So does anyone have any questions right now before we move on to the next major theme of this? So, failed consoles go up in price shortly after its fall. Does that price dip at all? So the price dip on failed machines tends to be, it happens, and it's quite brief. The price floor doesn't last for long. Shutting of the 3DS and Wii U shops are a hot topic right now. Do you think we'll see an increase in the price of physicals for those consoles now? Yes. So a good example of this is, do you remember a year or two ago, Sony was talking about shutting down the PSN stores for PS3 and Vita. Oh boy. Some of those some of the physical games really shot up in the wake of that announcement. Particularly Best of PlayStation Network Volume 1, which has Tokyo Jungle on it. I bought that relatively cheaply, and it ended up, I think, quadrupling in price. Dreamcast prices have shot up in recent years for some games, but not all games, and I'll get to why that is in a bit. So, next major topic: bargain hunting. If you've missed the price floor, there are still some ways to save money. Most of which are obvious, but they're all still worth bearing in mind. Vita's a good point. I'm stunned that my collector's edition of Undertale on Vita is worth as much as it is now. How much is that worth? So, and this ties into what Gundam was saying earlier. Yes, actually, Rio makes a very good point here. When the Neo Geo Pocket failed, there was a lot of warehouse stock. SNK actually recalled huge amounts of games that were on sale or due to go on sale in Europe and North America. They got blister packed with 6 really good games. You could buy them super cheap. And yeah, you could get extra blister packs of 4 games super cheap. Now it is a very expensive platform to collect for. Case in point, I've got one game, Dive Alert Becky's version, which is worth literally hundreds of pounds. Because I've got it fully boxed. And yeah, that stock liquidation took those prices right down, and then over time they have gone right up. Holy crap, £186. That is a lot of money. Okay, so bargain hunting. First and most obvious, avoid CEX and eBay if you can. I've spent my time quoting prices from these sites, and I'm telling you to avoid them. The thing is, what they're good at is availability. The trade-off is that prices are higher as a result. And if you're willing to be patient, you can find better deals. If you are going to use eBay, try not to buy it now. Try to get auctions if you can. They'll usually end up cheaper. But going off of those sites, independent retro gaming stores can be a source of games at great prices. Some of you will know Alan's Japanese retro gaming sales, Forgotten Worlds. The Saturn version of Dragon Force, Japanese version, normally goes a bit under 20 quid complete. And I got it from him in his January sale for... Not even his January sale. I got it from him 6 months ago for £4. Oh, you bought the Dreamcast stick from Alan. He's a good seller. I like Alan. If you don't have an independent shop nearby and you're not trusting Facebook, try and make a journey to events like London Gaming Market. See what they have to offer. Just go in with a rough idea of the value of the games that you're looking for, because some sellers offer dreadful deals and they are there to rip you off. Particularly at non-gaming events like MCM. Facebook groups can sometimes be a good source of bargains too. The one thing I'd be wary with Facebook groups is the potential for getting scammed. If you're going to buy on Facebook, use PayPal goods and services or another protected payment method. If someone insists you use friends and family, even after you offer to cover the added fees for goods and services, red flag. Don't do it. Obviously, charity shops and car boot sales are still an option. Just be realistic about what you're going to find there. You're most likely going to find price floor games from systems like the PS3, 360, and absurd bargains are very rare. If you work for a large organization, check and see if they have a staff small ads service. When I worked at the University of Essex, there were small ads email lists for staff and students, and I did superbly well out of them. I don't expect everyone to get like complete mega haul like I did, but there was one particular person who I ended up getting so much stuff from. I got a Jaguar, I got a Virtual Boy, I got the Sega Super System bundle, which is the Master System, the late phase of the 3D glasses. I got the ColecoVision, the Intellivision with the boxed games there, and NES, Mario Brothers Game & Watch. There was an Atari 2600, there was a boxed Gamecom, there was an N64 in there. There was so much stuff. That's a rare thing. But I did get some nice cheap games. I even got some PS2 and Xbox games absolutely free. So it's worth looking at those sorts of things if you've got access to them. Checked out Super Tomato in Cardiff when I was there for WWE. Picked up a few C64 games. Do this slightly annoying thing where they don't put prices on anything and they have to look everything up on their own database. That is annoying. I don't like that. Para made out like a bandit due to review copies being given away in the office. Yeah, that's a slightly different thing, but that actually leads me on to the next one. Managed to get a PS2 fat model for 20 quid from a charity shop a while back. Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that you can sort of expect to find every now and then. Oh, one thing about eBay though. Oh no, sorry. Other way around. Yeah, before we go on to this, one thing about eBay is, although I've just advised you to avoid it, there are certain circumstances where you can do quite well. So the site often runs discount promotions with certain sellers like Music Magpie that do offer older games, but more rarely they will run site-wide discount promotions, and these can be massively helpful in battering down the price of a game. It took 10% off my sealed copy of Michigan Report from Hell. I got 15% off my Dreamcast copy of Ikaruga. And if you're into imports, then proxy buying services like Zen Market and Buy can help you to get the items you want, but the fees can make doing that pretty expensive. But what they do is they will do promotions for first-time customers, offering things like big money off Macari items or international shipping costs. Let me see. Yes, here we go. Late 2021, I got 3,000 yen knocked off this bundle of Saturn games, which basically made it free apart from fees and shipping. A few years ago, I went to a more obscure Comic Con. There was an older couple selling off old systems for 20 quid each. 8-bit micros, ColecoVisions, Dreamcast got all 3 controllers, fishing rod, and 6 games. Nice. Nice, very good. Music Magpie's eBay for it presence is actually fairly decent. Yeah, I normally buy CDs off them more than I buy games, but they're worth looking at. But another piece of advice, and this ties into what Para was saying about the review copies in the office, is to be open about your collecting. I've often ended up with cheap or free games from friends and family who will offer them to me because they know that I'm likely to give them a good home. Recently, I had some relatives who were having a clear out. They gave me this old, slightly faulty TV. And they threw in copies of Capcom vs. SNK2, EO, and Street Fighter Anniversary Collection for the Xbox. Wonderful surprise, didn't ask for them. They just thought, well, Nick will make use of those. And that's something that people will do because they know what I do for a living. But it has actually been going on a lot longer than that because I've always talked about my interest in games and such. And within the office, I've had colleagues who I was recently given a slim PS2. Or with this selection of games, I bought them from a former colleague of mine, Luke, who did me a good deal on the retail games and threw in the promo review copies for free. How your brother and you got Panzer Dragoon Saga for a very good price? Nice. My regret, I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again. My regret with Panzer Dragoon Saga, I met my boss for the first time in 2005 at the Classic Gaming Expo UK in Croydon. He offered me Panzer Dragoon Saga, no out of box, but complete, otherwise, for 50 quid. And that was my whole budget for the day because I was a young student. And I turned him down. I bought some other games. And he regrets selling the game that day. I regret not buying it. Likely to give them a good home. Got given a lot of art books free just for being known as the art you want. Exactly. Need friends and family who don't want to keep such things for themselves in the first place. That's a fair point. Like some people will part with these things, some people won't. And one of the things that I want to emphasize with that is that please don't take advantage of anyone. I know I shouldn't need to emphasize that, but if someone's clearly not aware of the value of what they've got, don't sour your relationship with them. You don't want them to find out they've been lowballed. Be fair. If you couldn't afford to offer them money, do it. If you can't afford to offer them money and they're going to be giving away a fortune, just tell them that you can't reasonably give them what that's worth. Ultimately, your relationships with people are more important than your games collection. Another thing to do is to watch out for new old stock. Now, this is a rare occurrence, but every so often, someone will find a whole bunch of old games and consoles that never got sold, stuffed in the corner of a warehouse. And there are some sellers on eBay and elsewhere who specialize in liquidating stock like this, like with the Neo Geo Pocket stuff we mentioned earlier. And those sellers are worth keeping an eye on. Sometimes they have absolute crap, sometimes you'll end up with awesome stuff cheap. One excellent drop I was able to take advantage of happened in 2013. Can you pay them in exposure where you expose yourself in front of them as payment? Depends if they're into that. Ask consent. So in 2013, there was a relatively large amount of old Mega Drive stock found in Thailand. Consoles, games, the works. I already had most of the games that were on offer, and the other ones I weren't particularly interested in. But I was selling Mega Drives for like €70, but I picked up the Super Shinobi 2, and it was a legitimate copy for 20 quid in 2014. It felt like a steal at the time, and now you can see there are copies going well north of 100 quid on eBay. The PAL version is not much cheaper. It will go for 120 plus. So new old stock is something to keep an eye on. And particularly keep an eye on places that you wouldn't expect to be games specialists, like supermarkets and Argos, clearing out dead stock for older systems. That's always a good thing too. I got some 3DS games very, very cheap that Argos was clearing out not too long ago, including things like Dylan's Dead Heat Breakers and that. I think they were selling off WarioWare Gold for $3.50, $3.99. How did I know the seller on eBay was legit? Good question. So, as I mentioned, the fine took place in 2013. If you can see it on the screen there, I bought this copy of the game in July 2014. So I had plenty of time to check other buyers' experiences before diving in on that. But a lot of the new old stock sellers, like there's one guy on eBay, Simple Simon 1966. I've been buying from him for 20 years, and he's still got new old stock of PS2 games and stuff at the moment. I think you can get Graffiti Kingdom from him for 12-15 quid. Some of the 505 games like Zombie Zone, worth taking a look at. Argos, good shout. Toy stores, yes, toy stores, places like Smith's, very good as well. Can't really buy Tombi for less than £100 anymore. Sad to have lost my copy. I was actually given Tombi 2 for free. And again, this is where I say about having friends and family who are willing to help you out. So Simple Simon 1966 was the eBay seller that I just mentioned. Does anyone have any more questions before we move on and do a bit more, sort of change the subject a bit? OMG, yeah. Yeah, I've been given some very valuable games that I didn't know were valuable at the time. Can you play Japanese games on a UK system? That depends entirely on a system-by-system basis. Most modern systems, yes. Most older systems, no. Not without modification or some kind of adapter. Sometimes game publishers have stores and they do massive deals. Atlas and Square Enix, for example. Yeah, actually, NIS America do some massive discounts if you're into their games. PS1. No, PS1 you'd need to modify. I have a modded PS1 in my setup at the moment. Okie dokie. Yeah, older consoles could be modded to play import games. The difficulty depends. Like with the Dreamcast, you just need a boot disc. With the PlayStation, you need to either have a boot disc and use the swap trick, or modify it. Or yeah, there's Free Boot now. So there are non-intrusive options. Modding is usually the way to go. That's absolutely right. Sweet. So, lesson 3 covers anomalies, kind of exceptions to what we've talked about so far. Because most games tend to rise and fall in line with the overall value of their platforms. There are some exceptional circumstances. Picked up a modded PS1 at Gaming Market for 40 quid last year. Is one of the cheaper ones to pick up these days. Yeah, it is. Like, I was very lucky to get a modded Saturn for 60 quid a year or two ago. Like, that's well under what you should be paying for that. So, one of the first things you need to do is know your publisher. Not every company does business in the same way, and the result of that is you kind of need to watch out for certain companies whose games have unusual qualities. Nintendo is a really famous example of this. Their games tend to have evergreen pricing. Certainly, outside of Pokemon, it's quite rare for the company to release more than one game in a tentpole franchise per generation. You get like one big Mario platformer, one Mario Kart, one Smash Brothers, one or two Zeldas, and because of that, those games tend to keep very, very high retail prices. Often, typically, they're brand new prices for years. I remember I bought Mario Kart DS for 30 quid in 2005 when it launched, and 5 years later it was still exactly the same price. They have a stranglehold on the base price for all their first-party games. They do. And while it's not always applied, like on the big tentpole stuff, it usually is. It's very rare. Like, they did a budget line on the Wii and Wii U, but they don't have anything like that on the Switch. Another famous example is Konami tends to keep its print runs fairly tight, and so its games tend to become quite expensive. And I also suspect that this is true of Atlas games. When I was looking at the most expensive 3DS games, so many of them were Atlas games, and while part of that is down to their sort of specialism in more niche JRPGs, I think that, yeah, they're just quite hard to find, and I think they keep their costs controlled. Can't even expect a decent sale price on Nintendo eShop for their first-party games. Yeah, that's fair. Another thing to look out for is budget game publishers, smaller publishers that specialize in cheaper stuff. So in its early days, 505 Games, or 505 Game Street as it was wild. It released games, distribution would be all over the place. It could end up easier and cheaper to buy a game from France or Italy than track down a UK version. And you'll note that other budget publishers like Phoenix Games stuff can be quite expensive too. Now, budget publishers don't exist in the same way they used to, largely because of the prevalence of digital games these days, but it's something to keep an eye on. Do you really get greatest hits / value reprints of games at all anymore? Yeah, you actually do. So there's PlayStation Hits line for the PS4. Like games like Yakuza 0 were re-released on that. They are not as common as they used to be. There's no equivalent on the Switch. I don't believe that there is on the Xbox anymore either. So it's something that is not so common these days, but it's not like it's been a long time since anyone's done them. So another thing to note is the effect of the platform you've chosen. One way you can potentially save a bit of cash on your multi-platform games is to choose your console wisely. Nintendo platforms tend to attract a certain kind of fan, and they tend to be the most expensive ones to collect for. The SNES is more expensive to collect for than the Mega Drive, the N64 more than the PlayStation, the GameCube definitely more than the PS2. Oh, you can find those, Gundam, they're out there. The Wii is kind of proving to be an exception to that at the moment, because it sold very, very well, didn't use cardboard boxes for game packaging, so like, Wii games right now are dirt cheap. That might not be the case in the future, but right now that's kind of the exception. The Microsoft platforms are generally the cheapest to collect for. The original Xbox games tend to be way cheaper than PS2 or GameCube games. Not all of them. Obviously, Outrun 2006 is one of the best examples where It's way more expensive than the PS2 version, but broadly speaking, you can get many of the best original Xbox games for low prices, quite a few for under a fiver. And Xbox 360 games, as we noted earlier with the Suda51 stuff, they tend to be cheaper than PS3 games on the whole, largely because the system was very popular over here. Sony's home consoles are pretty steady normally, but the handhelds go in the polar opposite direction. So PSP collecting is dirt cheap. Like, it's amazing how cheap PSP games are. Vita games are expensive. There's no getting around that. So, yeah. OG Xbox games library is also super small. They killed the console. Yeah, that's true. It's not loads to collect, but like, I like collecting for the original Xbox because it tends to have the best versions of multi-platform games. And they are cheaper on the whole. Outrun 2SP on PS2 has some added features and as a result is even more expensive than the Xbox version. I'm aware that one is expensive. I don't know in detail what the differences are though. So one other factor is the effect of new audiences. Vita physical games are also really limited in print runs. Yeah, that's true. That's also true. So the effect of new audiences. If a game comes to a modern platform, that can have an effect on the price of a game. OG Xbox has a few very good exclusives. Yeah, so like obviously you got Jet Set Radio Future, the Project Gotham games are great. Stuff like Gun Valkyrie, the Otogi games, the Dead or Alive's on that platform are exclusive to it. There's some good stuff. And then there's some more offbeat stuff like Spike Out Battle Street that only I care about. So, here's a really good Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection came to PS3 digitally, Deacon. Is there anywhere IRL in the UK where you can find good stuff? So as I say, like, your best bet if you're not looking at independent stores is to try and get yourself to something like London Gaming Market. But yeah, Shenmue. So price charting. If you've never used price charting, it's a great website to see if you're actually correct in your assumption that a game is going up in price. So they started tracking the price of Shenmue in 2013. Starts off around the $20 mark, creeps up, spikes when Shenmue 3 is announced, and then it settles into a pattern of $35 to $40 for a few years. Slight variations up and down, but definitely more than the 20 to 25 that it was going for beforehand. And that held until 2018, and you can see when Shenmue 1 and 2 came to PS4, Xbox One and PC, the price fell down quite rapidly back into the $25 range. And since then, it's only crept up slightly to about $30. Original PS1 Clonora is similar story here. Yeah, it will be. One of the interesting things about this is that while these kinds of reissues can have an effect, they only seem to have an effect I've found when there is a physical version of the reissue. And I don't know for sure why that is, but I would guess, based on what I've seen in the market, that collectors want physical games. If they care enough to buy an old physical copy of a game, they care enough to buy a new physical copy of a game. So they might want Shenmue in their collection and be happy with PS4 or Xbox, but they wouldn't have been happy if it was a digital copy. Conversely, if a game comes to a modern platform via backwards compatibility, that tends to actually spike the price when that happens. You've seen that when games got added to the Xbox backwards compatibility program. Like, one good example was something like 50 Cent Blood in the Sand, which was like not very expensive, suddenly shot up into the 20 plus range and has since calmed down a bit. But that really should be something more to bear in mind for the future than being a concern for right now, because Sony's PS4 compatibility is pretty comprehensive on PS5, and it doesn't have any plans to support physical games for older platforms. Microsoft has Xbox One nailed on Series X and S, and isn't really adding any further games to the backwards compatibility program from 360 and OG Xbox. And Nintendo tends to be pretty all or nothing. Either the system completely supports backwards compatible games, for example, the GBA with the Game Boy and Game Boy Color, or the 3DS and the DS, or it just doesn't do it at all. Oh, that was not what I meant to do. So yeah, any questions on that stuff? Care about Spike at Battle Street has a soundtrack by Shinji Hosoe and Ayako Saso. Ah, I'm sure the game itself is also fine. It's fine. It is very anachronistic. It was not a game of its time. It played very similarly to the arcade game, which was 7 years old by the time that Battle Street came out. Yeah. Para, got a question. Go for it. Oh, clap. Sorry. I thought that was a hand being raised. Okay. So sounds to me like it could be dope in addition to having good tunes. I like it, but I can see why other people wouldn't get on with it. So there's one last thing, and it's going to sound like a joke, but please study Japanese. I know that sounds like a joke. It really isn't. So for many years now, I've had I've had this theory. A certain level of interest in Japanese RPGs, it is probably more cost effective to just learn Japanese than it is to pay for English language versions. So Earthbound, Mother 2. You want a complete Japanese copy of that? Go ahead, easy peas. Less than 20 quid, not a fucking problem. If you want to buy an English language copy, obviously you've got the virtual console releases and that now. You want a physical copy though, it's nearly £1.50 you're going to be paying. And now that's an extreme example. But it's not the only one. So Panzer Dragoon Saga in Japanese, 35 quid plus. If you're buying a UK copy, 400 plus. The US one is even worse. Final Fantasy VI on the SNES. Like, you can get that super cheap, complete boxed. If you want Final Fantasy III US version, oh boy, it's money. It might end up costing you the same amount in the long run, but you will be able to play those games and you will have gained a new skill. But there is a serious point in this. Even if you don't intend to play text-heavy games, imports can be a good way to get cheaper games sometimes. And a little knowledge of the language will go a long, long way in navigating menu options and ensuring you don't do stupid things like erasing all your saves. There are plenty of resources out there that don't cost anything. Para's mentioned Duolingo. And I've been doing this for a while now. I continually feel stupid. I feel like my brain is just bad. But being able to read stuff in a language that shares no common heritage with English is a pretty powerful feeling. And yeah, older games were never too heavily reliant on text anyway, some more than others. Obviously, once the visual novels start kicking in, you've got a problem. But yeah, got your Play Sakura Wars one with a translated script on the laptop. Nice. Obviously, there's now a fan translation out for that as well. Box copy of Mother 2 for £25 for an A grade. Excellent. And this is it. Like, RPGs in particular are not prized by collectors because they are hard to play if you don't speak the language. And the other thing is those games were just much more popular in Japan. And so the copies are just more abundant. And that's why the games are so much cheaper. But even, like, if you're collecting Sega Saturn games, you should be collecting Japanese Saturn games because they're just so much cheaper. There are PlayStation games, Chocobo Racing, very expensive in PAL, cheap Japanese game. N64 games. The N64 was third place in Japan behind the Saturn. And so, yeah, those games are dirt cheap. I do feel a little ashamed of how much I love all things Japan, but I've thought about getting into serious learnings. It's worth doing. Like, Japanese Saturn game collection is much bigger with better games. Yeah, absolutely. No denying it. Like, just, you can get so much stuff. Like, all the SNK games, so get retro games in Akihabara for like hundreds of yen. Like, my trip to Japan will happen one day, and I will spend a lot of money, I'm sure. But yeah, like, I've been since last summer learning Japanese, and I feel like every so often I'll hear something and just realize what it means without having to think about it. And when I do that, like, yeah, that's awesome. That's so cool. And so, like, again, it sounds like a joke, but genuinely, it's one of the most beneficial things you can do for your gaming habit. You, like, if you know English and Japanese, you're pretty much good to go. There are very few games that you will miss out on. So yeah. Any questions? Remember buying my first Super Robot Wars game, and I could follow a lot of the plot because they just ripped them off the TV series they have in the game. Well done. That probably didn't come through too loud because I'm wearing my headphones. So funny story. I interviewed a Japanese idol singer last month, and she's been learning English for a while now because she wants to be able to communicate with the fans. So it goes both ways. Like, she's got a lot of overseas fans she wants to talk to. Many of the classics have fallen into obscurity, at least to the West, due to lack of translation with visual novels. Yeah. So this is one of those things. Banshee's Last Cry. There was an English translation of it for iOS and maybe Android, definitely iOS. And that's now unavailable. There was an English translation and it's gone. You can't buy it. And that is a foundational classic of that genre. Deacon, I think I bought mine from him when I had a Power Turbo Graphics. Studied Japanese for a while when in uni, got basic grasp of the grammar and the vocabulary, just grew over the years due to the amount of Japanese media I've been exposed to. Yeah, there's definitely, like, if you watch a lot of stuff, if you look at a lot of, if you play a lot of games, you watch a lot of stuff, you will, even like listening to music, I've picked up things like, because the kind of music I've listened to, I've ended up picking up words like curse and darkness and sacrifice. So that's more about me than anything else. But yeah. Was he the guy who got my PAL Turbo graphics off? Yeah, Overlord, I think he probably was. Because I think I put you on to him around the time I bought mine. Will the VOD of this be saved onto YouTube? Yes, I will be putting this up on YouTube. Deja vu. Yeah, there is no good reason to buy a PAL Turbo graphics. Like, I bought it for the novelty, and now I have the Japanese PC Engine original model with the briefcase CD unit. Hi YouTube. Yeah. This thing is still much easier than reading though. Well, now that's, yeah, I mean, it is and it isn't. Like, kanji does my nut. Like, it's like, one of the things that I find is if you've got something, one of the things that really helps you batter the kanji into your memory is if you are listening to them being said as you're reading them. So I got hiragana and katakana down when I was working at the university a decade ago. And then because I had free lunch times then, and then when I got a job in games journalism, suddenly the office was really interesting at lunchtime. So I fell off learning for a bit. Best part of a decade. Next time I go to Japan, I might just bring a second suitcase home. Katakana is like cheap home. Hiragana, not so much. Yeah. See, I'm pretty good on that, I think. One of the things that I found that helped with that on Duolingo was the rapid fire stuff. Random question: are there cases where remakes of classic games raise the price of the original? Resident Evil 4 comes to mind. So Resident Evil 4, the GameCube version, and I'm going off CEX prices again right now. The GameCube version, and this is prices as of last weekend. The GameCube version is about 18 quid. The PS2 one about tenner, and the Wii one about fiver. And I don't know if the price will rise, but I would suspect not, just because Resident Evil 4 is one of those games that is available on everything. I'm trying to think of a time when a remake or reissue has raised the price of the original significantly. Do you know what? I didn't look at it, but I wonder if Sonic Origins might have done, with people wanting the original Sonic 3 soundtrack. That would be interesting to look at. In fact, you know what? Let's have a look on price charting. Ah, well, yeah, but it was only on that at the time. They weren't wrong. Just, it was a temporary exclusivity. So, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 for the Genesis, because that's got the best price tracking. Okay. Uh, hmm. Do you know what? There was a little dip after last summer on Sonic 3. But then it crept back up. Sonic 3 shot up in value recently, particularly the Japanese version. Sonic and Knuckles even more so. Wow. Okay. They're only temporarily correct. Yeah. Sometimes being temporarily correct is the best kind of correct. But yeah, so like I would have thought if Sonic Origins did anything to Sonic 3, it would have put it up, but it did put it down very briefly. Going to Japan in December, everyone give me shopping lists. If I gave you my shopping list, Aiden, it'd look like the list that Jericho had when he was reading out how many his list of 1004 holds. Armbar! But yeah, any other questions? What kind of stuff do I want from Japan? The experience of being there more than anything else. That's what I want now. Any white whales? See, for me, I'm someone who tends to just take opportunities. My personal collecting style, I tend to take opportunities where I find them rather than looking for specific things. The one thing that I would quite like to get at the moment is, and I know this is very expensive, a Mega CD 1. I have a Mega CD 2, so I don't need it to play the games. But I have left room in my new console setup specifically for the Mega CD 1, 32X, Mega Drive 1, Tower of Power, sufficient that I could fit a Sonic 3 and Knuckles on top. Beyond that, See, I got one of my Dreamcast ones, Cosmic Smash, relatively recently. So I've not thought a lot about what I might want to pick up. Game prices, do console prices follow similar trends? Yes, basically yes. Now, one of the things is that certain models of consoles will break away from their price trends. So, for example, if you have something like a PS3 with PS2 compatibility, that will be much more expensive than a bog standard slim or super slim. And that's for two reasons. One is that the console hardware itself is susceptible to failure, really susceptible to failure. And two, obviously, the extra features make it more desirable. So, other systems where you get a kind of split, the Sega Master System, the Master System 1 has RGB SCART output, Master System 2 only outputs RF, so it's not as useful. But yeah, broadly speaking, consoles start off expensive, become dirt cheap, and then creep up in price again. Would I like a Japanese console, or is it the same as having an English one? So I actually have some Japanese consoles in my collection. Just looking over, I have the PC Engine and PC Engine CD. I have the Japanese Sega Saturn. I have what other Japanese machines do I have? Do I have other Japanese machines? Anyway, there is a difference. And this is more about older systems again. The difference between having a Japanese machine and a UK machine is, one, there's the region locking aspect of it, but two, Japanese games, Japanese consoles run NTSC video output. And see you later, Ryokazuki. Thanks for popping in. UK consoles, European consoles output PAL video. American consoles also output NTSC. PAL video runs at 50 hertz, NTSC runs at 60 hertz. And a lot of older games were not properly optimized to run at the slower refresh rate, which means that they run slower. The extra resolution of the PAL format just means they have thick black borders on the top and bottom of the screen. Broadly speaking, Japanese machines are more desirable than UK machines because they run games better. Yeah, that's really it. So that's why I have a Japanese Saturn. It runs games at 60 hertz, which is lovely. PC Engine, the only console to be labeled woke. I don't know. Got the pink PS2. 2 Japanese Saturns, Japanese PS2, and Japanese Dreamcast. Nice. I see with the Dreamcast, I'm not too worried because it does 60 hertz naturally. I have a test PS2, so that runs PAL and NTSC games naturally. I've got an Asian PAL Mega Drive that I modded. Did a region switch on. Oh yeah, I have a Super Famicom as well, of course. I also have some American systems. I have a top-loading NES. I have a US Super NES. Oh, and I have a Mark III. I have a Sega Mark III. That's an interesting system. So yeah, I've got Japanese and US systems. They're good to have around. Like, yeah. Oh, now actually a Nomad. If I could ever get a Nomad for a decent price. Ooh. For those not in the know, a Nomad is a portable Sega Genesis, the US Mega Drive. It's bulky, it's power hungry, and ever since I heard about it, I've wanted it. Like before I ever bought anything on eBay, I used to look at the prices of those on eBay. There was a game station years ago that had two at £100 each with a game. Wow. I look at all the games in the backgrounds. Yeah, I do want games. No, Nomads were never. Nomads were not at a reasonable price. Particularly like even when I was looking 20 years ago, they were expensive. One other thing that I collect, which doesn't quite fit console or handheld or even computer, is I have a Neo Geo MVS arcade board. Which is currently in storage. But oh, I don't know what to do with it because I don't want to run it as a bare board. Like I keep thinking, do I want to put it in a coffee table? Do I want to case it up and consoleize it? I'm not sure. Do you know, Overlord? When we met up to look at that Rambo arcade game, I'm sure I saw one in the window of the game station there. Old and wonderfully janky DDR related peripherals that you'd be very happy to own. Were money no object and my flat not above ground, I would like a metal DDR pad. Because those soft ones, they are not durable. That's your white whale. Do you know what? I actually lived in a place where they had a metal DDR pad. So between Shibuya knows this. When I was working for the university, I would end up temporarily homeless each summer because I was living with students. And so I ended up having to sort of ask friends very nicely to put me up for a few months. Um, and one summer I stayed with Shibuya. That was how we met, really. And then the next summer I stayed at a place near the University of Essex, that one of my housemate's girlfriend was living there. Um, yeah, the summer of fun. Ugh. Um, anyway, so living in my friend's girlfriend's place, um, there was a metal DDR pad right outside the bedroom that I was sleeping in. But yeah, portable Mega Drive, like a proper portable Mega Drive. Oh, oh, that's nice. Yeah, that summer was quite the summer. We had very unreliable internet. I hooked up a TV aerial to my laptop with a USB stick, and I had the Sega Saturn as my primary gaming machine. Um, Nomad was the prototype Switch. Well, interestingly, do you know the PSP Go is very much like that as well? There's a dock that you can buy for it, which allows you to hook it up to a TV and a DualShock 3. Oh yeah, when I was making bro puns all the time. Oh, to be fair, my brain was pretty broken at the time. Seriously, I was a mental health mess. Um, no, wait. Well, yeah. Was bro puns both times? I can't remember. For the unreliable internet, we were using BT Wi-Fi with Fon, where you had to pay like a fiver for a day's access. Oh, disgusting. Um, I forgot that was even a thing. Yeah, BT Fon, what the fuck? Yeah, actual torture. Yeah, it was bad. It was terrible. So, yeah. Um, oh, that was like I think I would prefer to have no internet than like the breadcrumbs of internet that Thon gave me. Oh, Star, hiya. Good to see you. And yeah, like I think we all repressed that memory. Yeah, 512 kilobits a second, more like 512 bits a second. Oh. And the thing is, what you got to understand is that when I was living with Shibuya the first time, um, we were living um, we were living in a very small seaside town where like nothing happened. Um, there was one video game available to buy in town, and it was for the PS3, which I didn't even have. Um, like the chip shop closed at 8:30, and yeah, it was just boats. Like I woke up in the morning and I could see boats out the window. The flower beds in town were shaped like boats. All there was boating supply stores. Um, when I went in the local, like the flower beds were shaped like bloody boats. When I went in the local, the Yachtsman's Arms, I sat down, got a drink of Coke. They said, "Would you like a magazine to read?" I said, "That would be lovely." And they gave me Yachting Monthly. I genuinely boats. Just boats. So much boats. No one man she would have so much boats. But yeah, no worries, Star. Like, as I say, it's never an obligation to be here. And yeah, the VOD will be going up in a little bit, just so that everyone can have a look at this. Oh, if the drink had come in a boat, I think I would have literally jumped into the sea. Turbo boats, yeah. Boat face. I nearly changed my name to that. But yeah, it was a fun summer. Um, the only thing was being like um a bus ride away from civilization. I did not meet Para until I moved to Bournemouth, Shibuya. Um, like the only interaction that I had with anything to do with Para before I met Para was there's this one particular um thing about wanting to give your internet friends a hug that one of my I'd say one of my friends, Maggie, you'll know, shared. Um, yeah, and that was the first time I saw any of Para's art. So it's always like the first time one of the first times I met Kyrie. I mentioned the Sillet Bang song, and she was like, "Oh, please don't talk about that. My boyfriend did that." Like the internet brings us closer than we could ever want to be. Like living parallel. I've got. Ah. What, the Silly Bang thing? Yeah, that guy came to my house. We played Extreme Express on the PS2 because he was like going for a massive Thomas the Tank Engine phase at the time. Um, yeah. Uh, yeah. Um, he like he's one of those guys who's like he would have loved battle construction vehicles, but he didn't want anything to do with me after he and Kyrie split up. Um, but yeah, yeah. So yeah, we do. It's like it's an interesting thing when you get into these sorts of creative circles that you end up running into certain people. Like with Kyrie, she knew someone I knew through the Sonic fandom because they'd been at the same kitchen rave in California. Um, so it's an interesting thing because you learn um, that internet famous people are just like you, um, weird habits and all. A kitchen rave is a very Ron Seal thing, Shibuya. It's a rave in a kitchen. Oh dear. But yeah, so I mean, I'm trying to think of like I mean, there's just some crazy coincidences I've had where, yeah, it is a strange thing because obviously, like, I heard the Eshore and Sillet Bang stuff years before. Never thought that I'd end up meeting him, having him come around my house. But then you I've just learned that I have a kind of weird life. Like, I never thought that I'd be eating breakfast and have Yu Suzuki wave hello as he walked past to get his own. it's, um, yeah, shit's mad. Um, and I later worked with Parrot. Well, yeah, exactly. Like, I, I'm very fortunate to have the friends I have be friends with lots of creative people, and to have a good set of friends. But yeah, and oh, yeah, another thing, like you might have seen someone on Twitter, Kimimi, who has written for Retro Gamer, has written for Nintendo Life, all sorts of things. And years ago, she wrote for my Dreamcast website. Brief correspondence with Toby Fox. Nice. Yeah, like here we go. Nice. Ah, we're doing commissions now. Ooh. Um, but yeah, since I think we've kind of come to the end of the game collection discussion, more or less, unless anyone's got some last questions, um, then I think I'm gonna probably wind up because I need to do some stuff before I head off for the weekend. Um, so if you've got game collecting questions that you want me to address, please please gib. No, no, it's okay. Like, I was fully complicit in the derailing of the conversation. No worries, Aiden. Like, the thing that I've always said is, like, if I just liked playing retro games, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. The reason I write about them and the reason I stream is because a lot of the joy that I get out of gaming is sharing the stuff that I enjoy with other people. Um, like, it makes me happy to play something like Incredible Crisis, but it also makes me happy to see someone see Incredible Crisis for the first time and go, holy shit, I love this soundtrack, this game's mad, I'm gonna buy it. Battle Construction Vehicles, like seeing Deacon pick that up, oh man. um so if you it really depends on what you're doing. If you're selling games, then like there are different advantages to different platforms. Um, so eBay, you will probably maximize your income. CEX has predictable pricing because you can look up what they'll give you on their website. Um, if you don't want to go through the hassle of posting stuff, advertise on Facebook for local pickup. Yeah, absolutely, Star. I would more than welcome that. Yeah, just grab me in Power Server or something. Or you could leave a comment on the YouTube video. Um, I wouldn't recommend selling on Amazon at all. Um, yeah, like eBay if you want money, CEX if you need money now. Um, like Facebook for convenience. It really depends. The other thing you can do is like if you want to make sure it goes to a good home, if that's important to you, then like offer it around to friends on Twitter or Tumblr first. That's always a good idea as well. So yeah, it depends what you prioritize. Um, don't want to ask anything I've already covered. I wouldn't mind. Money is good. Money can be used to get goods and services, and I hear that's pretty rad. Yeah, CEX like um the and I apologize for bringing this up again, but the Death Threat Saturn, I got I took that to CEX just because I knew what price they'd give me for it. I was happy with what they'd give me for it, and I knew that like I could have the money in about an hour. Um, rather than faffing around with like PayPal, possible issues with buyers, things like that. Like, okay, okay. What a name for an object. Well, I don't know what else I call it. It was a Saturn that I was given as an apology for a death threat. uh, I don't own it anymore. I don't own any consoles that I was given as apologies for death threats now. Which is good. I played I played bass for Death Threat Saturn. We came fourth in the local Battle of the Bands once. Dynamite Heady, weirdly, now that's interesting. Treasure games normally are quite expensive, but Dynamite Heady for some reason isn't. Like Gunstar Heroes, money. Ikaruga, money. Something like Bangayo, I think, is money. And obviously Radiant Silvergun we know to be money, but even like Sin and Punishment on the Wii is in the 30 to 40 quid range now. Dynamite Heady, I think they will do boxed for 15 quid. Dynamite Heady isn't that well known, and I think it's one of the better selling treasure games as well. Lost out to the ABH Atari Jaguar. You get ABH from playing that. Dynamite Heady not on the Mega Drive Mini. What? Sin and Punishment? What? The Wii one? Didn't think the Switch Online had Wii games. I know the N64 one was on like Virtual Console and that. The N64 one actually isn't tremendously expensive. There's not an awful lot of really essential N64 import exclusives, to be honest. Yeah, no, I was talking about the Wii version. That's sort of relatively expensive by Wii game standards right now. Um, Needing to... Haha, well done. Right. And catch you later, Shibuya. Thanks for coming. Okie dokie. Well, since we've gone past 9:30, I am gonna call it quits. I think. Um, yeah, I would rather things I would rather things be cheaper and my stuff be worthless. And I genuinely mean that. But you know, is what it is. MetaJ92, thank you for following me. I hope you enjoyed the stream. But yeah, thanks all for coming. I will upload the VOD shortly. And yeah, I'll thank you, Para. Oh, that's very kind. Okay. So, as always, take care. And as is now traditional, later, chumps. Bye.